So we started a program that we call Active Membership. And for those of you who are on our Facebook group, you probably know that there are about 1,700 people on our Facebook group, which is almost an impossible number to deal with. It's just too many people. And it's hard to get people to show up and do things and work on those specific projects. So on the coordinating committee, and Dawn and Christina and Ginny and I are on and Jill are on the coordinating committee. So and John Roy, who's not here this evening. We sat around and talked about how can we identify the people who are willing to roll up their sleeves and show up and who can be there when they need help. And so we came up with this concept of the active membership. And so what we have done is on our website, and I can show you our website. Okay. I'm kind of doing this. Okay. On our website, we have a sign-up table, a tab. And this is a description of the active membership program. So before you sign up, we want you to read this, or whoever signs up, to make sure that you understand what you're getting into. This is the feet on the street. We really need your time. We need you to volunteer and dedicate some time to the cause. And this is where you sign up to do that. Once you sign up here, it starts this whole process going where you'll get information from us. You'll get an account on Google Drive, which is a shared drive. It's kind of like being out in the cloud. And so we can put files out there that we can share as a group. We also will give you access to our work group tool, which is called Slack. I know this is really difficult to see. But Slack is a work group productivity tool that allows groups to come together to work on projects. So it's a whole lot better than email. It's like way better than Facebook. And it will allow us to work together as a team on little projects as we go along. So one of the things that I've been doing is offering training on Slack. And so some of the folks who are here in the room tonight did attend my very first Slack training. So did that help you, the folks who were on there? Okay, that's good to know. If you'd like to sign up for Slack training and you're an active member or you're planning to sign up for it as an active member, there's a sign-up sheet over here. It's called Slack Workspace Training Sign Up. And I'm just trying to get a feel for what's your availability on different days and times. So if you want to take the training, just write your name in there and then put a check mark against the various times that you might be available. And we'll try and get another class or two together so that people understand this tool and how it works. So we have about 30 people, it's actually a little closer to 35 people now signed up as active members, which is great. And if you have an invitation, if you get an invitation once you sign up to join this Slack workspace, just make sure that you accept the invitation and then you'll get whatever you need to start working on it. We tested this out just this past week. We got a phone call, we got a tweet actually from Joan Osborne, who's a singer, who was going to be in town on last Friday and said, would you guys like to set up a voter registration table? So we thought, well, let's put this to a test, right? And so we put the word out to the active members, said, can anybody sign up to staff a voter registration table on Friday at this place, this time? And we got a lot of volunteers, and then we just showed up, had the table, had the voter registration forms. People could plan online who needs to get what time do we need to show up, who's bringing this, who's bringing that. And it worked perfectly. We didn't even have to pick up the phone. So that was very exciting for us because that was just how we hoped that it would work. People who were willing to step forward, and at a moment's notice when we got an opportunity like that, they did step forward. So one of the other things that we do for our active members, not to our active members, Rochester on the 10th of May. We've got, there's a bunch of other things, and so we'll send out a request to say, can you help on any of these things? And then that comes back to us, and then we get those people in touch with each other, and we set up some of our work teams to work on those things. So that's really the biggest thing that we've been up to is our active members and the active member activities. I'll keep reminding you about, here's what I learned spreadsheet, not spreadsheet, but it's a document out there where people are going out to, this is actually on our Google Drive, but are going out, there's some instructions here, and this is all the things that we've learned since Trump took office. So as we learn about our government and how it works and things that we never knew and we didn't know we needed to know, all these things are on here. So now, most recently, we've added a taint team and a special master, so it's like right up to date. So anyway, so I would encourage you to do that. And our plan with this is that at some point in time, we'll just have a fun evening and we'll come up with some big roll of paper or something and some markers, and we'll all get together and we'll just write these things out on the long piece. And then we'll take it someplace where we can hold it up high and unfurl it, and we'll take a video and make a dramatic presentation. Send it into Indivisible, and maybe we can get on their Indivisible, and that would be fun. Okay, so let's see. Go back to my presentation here. I have some information here. I wasn't sure Dawn was going to get back today in time, but you were here. I've already talked about the registration tables that we did at Funk and Waffle on Friday. But we're also doing a couple of things. We have Judy Schwartz is going to speak on April 26th at the Fairport the Inn on Main in Fairport. So if you remember, Judy came and talked to us a few months ago about voter registration, and she represents the Rochester Voter Alliance.
Yes.
We partnered up with them this year, and they usually only are active during presidential election years, but our energy and enthusiasm were such that they decided to go off cycle and do it again 2 years in a row instead of waiting for 4 years. So Don, is there something that you'd like to add?
Just the June 14th, check the webpage. But there is going to be training from Rochester Voters Alliance. Judy's going to have the training for registered voters as well as sign up. This is going to be sign up for 2 hours. There's great friends, so the two of you can work together. But it's 2-hour shifts or 3-hour shifts at different locations in the city. So we're going to be working on registering voters in the city. So a lot of different places.
There's 2 questions to register or train to register.
It's the training. In June, we're having
Training how to register. And how is that different from April 26th, the voter registration?
April 26th, and Judy's talking about Rochester Voters Alliance and what it is and what it does. So this is to, the 26th is to say, okay. We already have, Judy was here. January. So, we started working with her, and everybody got excited about registering voters. So she is very dynamic, and will bring some enthusiasm to the team. You'll want to move us. You want to sign up for as many different slots as you can.
So this is April 26th, is that basically repeat of what you did here?
Correct.
I can't.
Yes.
Can you
So
repeat
you
the
heard-
question? I can't.
Yeah, on April 26th, that meeting will be the same as the one that we have here.
Thank you.
Explaining how Rochester Voter Alliance works, explaining the process.
Yeah.
The training often has people from Board of Elections there as well. I don't know if this one will, but usually there's a Board of Election person there. So it's pretty official. And then free sign up.
And actually Barbara does a lot with registered voters too. So if we have specific questions, can I ask them?
Is the 14th or is the 12th? 14th is the
It's at 7:30 for the, you're talking about Judy's thing?
Yeah.
It's at 7:30 on the 26th.
No.
The train, sorry.
Okay.
Then I'm not sure.
It's a Thursday. It's a Thursday. It's the 14th.
The 14th of June is the training for registration.
At sometime around 6.
It probably
It's here, too,
It's on
right?
the
Is it
website.
here?
It's here.
It is right here in this
It is
room.
right here.
It's on the website on our
Yeah.
list.
Oh, that's a good idea. You have to check the website.
Yeah.
Find out.
IndivisibleRochester.org.
How long have you been doing this?
The group?
Yeah. This Indivisible Rochester.
Okay. We started, well, Christina's one of the founding members, so we started about, well, shortly after Trump got elected, right? And so we've been growing ever since. It started out with a handful of people who were really angry, and then we, have expanded and continuously since then. So this is a very good turnout.
The Rochester Action.
Action Together Rochester. Yes. They're another organization locally. Indivisible is one of the 6,000 local Indivisible groups that are associated with Indivisible National. So you hear about the Indivisible organization, Rachel Maddow a lot on MSNBC. So we're part of that, and our focus tends to be on government, our representatives, policy in the administration, legislation, members of Congress, our representatives, those kinds of things. So there's a lot of cross-section between what we do and what ATR does, and with other groups as well. But when it comes to what's the law that's behind this thing, that's when they come to us, and that's the kind of thing that we look into. Which kind of leads me into the next committee, which is our Legislative Action Committee that Ginny Hall chairs. And we just had an event this past week. Ginny, would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Okay, so on Thursday, we had a couple come in from Brooklyn with their baby, who was beautiful. And they spoke to us about something that was very important to them. They have started a campaign throughout New York because they had to have a late-term abortion. It was 32 weeks by the time they were able to do it because they did not find out that their baby was going to die immediately upon being born until week 30. Everybody thinks that pregnancy just kind of goes along and then it's good news, you have a baby. And then you might know that there's early miscarriages. But what people don't realize is just how very often you don't get bad news until after 24 weeks. Sometimes the bad news is that the mother is very sick and the pregnancy has to be terminated. In New York State, the law on abortion after 24 weeks has been deemed unconstitutional because it does not account for inviolability of the fetus or the health of the mother. So they're on a campaign to get a bill passed, which has passed the Assembly, but will not come up in the Senate. The Senate won't bring it up. And so they're trying to get attention to this, because until you meet someone like this or have it happen to you, you don't realize this is even a problem. We all think New York is very progressive, but let's remember that Iowa had gay marriage before we did. So they had to fly to Colorado. Imagine this hanging over you, this tragedy in your life, and you have to get on a plane, which is a tragedy in itself. It's awful. And to drive, and to fly to Colorado and see a doctor there, and fly back here, and then deliver.
At a cost of $25,000.
Yes, it was $10,000 in Colorado, and it would have been $25,000 if they'd done the whole thing there, but it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
On top of the nightmare that they already had. Just the fact that it was going to happen was a nightmare enough, but The state's law made it worse. So they came and talked to us and explained this whole thing, and they're going around going to all the major cities through the Indivisible groups, and we are trying to get some legislative action going to get the Senate to get off their butts and do something about this. The law is unconstitutional. There's got to be something.
Right, it doesn't meet the standard of Roe v. Wade.
It doesn't.
So that was a really great session, and we co-sponsored that with Planned Parenthood of Western and Central New York, and Rochester National Organization for Women, and the New York Civil Liberties Union.
Right.
So we had a great turnout. It was at the Fairport Library, so that was very successful.
And they were in Albany today.
Yeah.
We had a Holland Day today. I called a bunch of people, yelled at them on the phone. I don't yell at them. I was very nice to them.
That's right.
Talked to them
Angelic
about
troublemakers. That's what
You know?
Angelic troublemakers.
I was very nice, but I was firm about how important this was.
Right.
So yes, so that's the most recent thing we've done, and that's the kind of legislative action that we do. The facets of it are calling people and telling them what we want them to do, paying attention to how they are voting, so we know how to vote for them in the future, so that we all know where they stand on things, and then the endorsement process.
Right.
Those are kind of the different things we'll be doing.
And yeah, so those last two things that Ginny mentioned, the tracking of our elected officials and the endorsement process, are two things that the Legislative Action Committee is going to start in on very, very soon here. And so if you've signed up for that, we have some plans to get together a small group to do some planning and figure out how we're going to approach this. But one thing, if you can't participate for whatever reason in endorsing a candidate as a group, maybe you can pick a politician, pick a representative to track and say, when is this person going to be in town? What are the bills that they're sponsoring? How did they vote recently when they took this vote last week? That kind of thing, and keeping the rest of us informed. So we'll be coming to you with those kind of asks in the very near future. Okay, so let's see. Our Finance Committee, Jill Hampton is our treasurer, and Jill's been working on a distributed funding model from the National Indivisible Organization, and we almost got it done, and very soon we'll be able to take donations on the website. So there will be a tab on the website for donations. You will be able to make recurring donations if you like. If you have people who want to know how can I help, what can I do, you can send them to the website. And the way this works is that part of the donations go into an organization called Act Blue, which many of you have probably seen. Anytime you get an email asking for funds from anybody, it goes through Act Blue usually. And then Indivisible manages all that for us, and then they take a percentage fee because they have the lawyers and the accountants and all of the financial systems set up. And we're just a grassroots organization. We're not organized officially. We're not incorporated. We don't have any officers. And so we and many of our brethren in the other 6,000 groups are in the same boat. So they put together this distributed funding model where they do all the hard work, and then they take a cut, and then they give us the 85% of the money that we raise. And then we'll have some money that we can actually work with, and that'll be nice. So, Jill, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, that was pretty much it.
Okay. All right. So we'll be rolling that out soon, and we'll let you know when that happens. John Borda is our communications director, and John is working on his PhD at Brockport State. And so he has a class on Tuesday nights, so we won't be seeing him for the next couple of months. But John did come up with our new logo, which you can see on the name badges. These are the name badges for the active members. So if you were an active member, haven't picked up your name badge, they're over there on the table. He came up with a new banner, and he's developed some business cards. There's a few over there on the table. It's just got our contact information, our email address, and the Facebook page, and that kind of stuff. And he's been working on the website. So John's been very busy while he's been working on his thesis, but he has been making some really great contributions for us here. And this is a picture of our new logo. And we kind of modeled it off of the new Indivisible logo, if you've seen the one from National. And then this is our new banner. It's got the skyline of Rochester in the background. So we're very grateful to John for the work that he did on that. Okay, so now stuff coming up, lots of stuff coming up. So May 5th is a Rochester Activism Fair. We have volunteers from the active members coming. We're going to be at, I've forgotten where the location is. It's on the
Visual
website.
Studies Workshop.
Visual Studies Workshop, yeah.
Prince Street.
On Prince Street. We'll be there from 11 to 2, along with other activist organizations, and we'll be handing out information about our group. And on May 10th, there's going to be a summit that we're actively involved in organizing. Christina and Dawn and I are working with Chris Thomas and Aaron Fraser, who are on the Lawyer Selection Committee for the Monroe County Democratic Committee. And their effort this year is to diversify the family court benches, because above city court, there are no judges of color in our legal system, in our judicial system here in Monroe County, and mostly throughout the state. So one of the things that they offered to do was, since there are so many activist organizations like Action Together Rochester and lots of others, they said, what if we came together, the leaders of all of those groups came together for a summit to see where we could leverage. And they were willing to host it, help us, well, we would help them organize it, and so we've been working with them for the last couple of months to try and put this in place, and that's coming up soon, May 10th. On May 15th, so the third Tuesday here, we'll have our May event, and that will be, Aaron and Chris are going to come and talk about the family court and some of the activities that they've got, that they've been working on. Christina, you're working with them about the May 15th event. Do you have anything to add to what they're going to talk about?
No, just about, why it's important, to have diversity within the family court and, their role in, helping us get there. And,
Okay.
but yeah, they're great speakers, and it should be
They
a
are
really
great
good
speakers.
event.
Yeah. Okay. We reached out, we got notification from Indivisible National that there was an effort to appoint the NRA's favorite lawyer as a full-time, for-life judge on the bench, on the federal court. And so there's something that we can intersect with the March for Our Lives folks. And so we've got word out to them to work together so that we can help those students. The March for Our Lives is the student activist group, to actually start a campaign to try and keep this lawyer from being named for the judicial bench. So you can see the intersection there between what we do in Indivisible and what they're involved in for gun reform on March for Our Lives. Pretty soon, because we have our new logo, we're going to be doing new t-shirts. These are the old t-shirts, but their funding model doesn't quite sync up with our new funding model, so we got to find somebody else to do t-shirts, and we got a new logo. So if anybody can help us with that, we just put out a general call for assistance on that. We would be very pleased if somebody could help us get new t-shirts and perhaps some other, trinkets that we can make available. Okay, and then one last thing before I finish and introduce Barbara is there's a lot of talk recently about Mueller getting fired or Rosenstein getting fired. And so tentatively we have a plan, and we're trying to work out this final details of this with Action Together Rochester. But if you go out to like moveon.org, which is one of the main websites that you see involved in all of these kinds of activities, and they talk about Mueller, and they say find an event in your area. If you go and put in Rochester, New York, or your local zip code, it will come up with an event that's been out there for a year because we figured this might happen anytime. So we want to be prepared, and so the date is not out there, but our thinking is this, that if either one of them gets fired and it happens before noon on any given day, at 5 o'clock that afternoon we all show up at Washington Square Park. If they get fired after noon, we show up the next day at noon or 2 o'clock. That's the thing that we're not quite sure, whether it's at noon or at 2 o'clock, but one or the other. And we didn't even a flow chart with a decision maker. Or afternoon. And then, so just, be prepared for that. If it happens, and I hope it doesn't, but if it happens, just remember, we're going to be out there on that day or the next day.
So maybe you have a sign waiting at home, just in case?
Yeah. You have a sign waiting at home.
You like carrying an umbrella on your face.
That's right. Do a sign now, maybe it won't happen at all. That would be beautiful. Yes, Connor.
Do you have people who will bring people, science is a great idea. Do you need people to talk about, do we have interpreters who will be there?
Yeah, we're going to need to
Volunteers
do
and
all
stuff like
that planning stuff,
So,
yeah. So probably what we should do is have we should have a plan, and then everybody knows what they have to do and what they have to bring, and then we can just, whatever day that is, we'll just execute the plan. But
So are we going to put that on Slack then?
we could do that. Yeah, we could do that. Let me make a note of that, and we could organize that on Slack.
I can help with that if you
Great. Okay.
Because you'll need sound system,
Yeah.
if you're thinking of doing it that way.
Yeah,
I don't know who can get the mayors and that,
Yeah.
we'd have to find out.
All
Or
that
we
stuff.
can, we can figure out who has, we should contact
Yeah.
people with sound systems,
Yeah.
we should contact,
Yeah.
David and I are right there, we can bring our chairs and
Okay.
water, but.
And we have a rapid response template that
Yeah.
we've used many times, and so I'll just put that on Slack.
Yeah.
Okay. And yes, we will have interpreters, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now I'm done. Are there any other questions? Yes, Herman.
Does that lawyer who is being appointed as judge, does that require Senate confirmation?
Yes,
So we can call our senators?
yes.
Okay.
That's right. And we thought that would be a great exercise for the kids to learn how to contact their senators, what they need to say, and to, bring up this particular issue. Yes.
One of the other things on the potential firing that Individual National did, they have a Facebook thing,
Yeah.
and they were talking about after the rally, after the immediate response, calling your representatives and Senate and saying, you got to hold up, vote down. So you're telling them to hold up all Senate proceedings by not agreeing to any standard practice. And one senator can hold up a whole lot in the Senate because of their procedural rules.
That's right.
So after the rally, that's another thing that you probably want to make people aware of.
Okay, that's a good idea. All right. So did everyone hear that? That was like after we have a rally, there's another action that, with regard to Mueller and Rosenstein, that would be to contact our senators and tell them to just bring business to a halt, which they can do, and not let anything get done on the floor of the Senate until this issue gets resolved, and be adamant to have that. So we'll work that into. Okay, yes, Herman.
I actually posted something about this on Facebook. There is a bipartisan bill in the works in Congress that would make it harder for Trump to fire Rosenstein or Mueller. And it hasn't passed, but there are co-sponsors on the Republican and Democratic co-sponsors. So what we could do now in advance is call our senators to support that bill. I think it's
That's right.
S2644, but I could be off on those numbers.
Okay. But we can,
Not on the post, so that post is up there. It's near
so,
the
but
top.
not everybody's on Facebook, so we'll have to get that information out to the folks who are not on Facebook, but Herman's point is that there is a bipartisan bill that could be voted on this week to make it really difficult for those two guys to be fired. And if they do get fired, then I think the recourse is to take it to a three-judge panel to see if they've been fired for cause or not. And if not, then they can keep going. And that's the gist of that bill. Okay, so all good suggestions, things that we can do. That's good. Okay, Don, would you like to come up and introduce Barbara? While you're doing that, we'll get, where is Barbara? Here she is. We'll get her presentation on
It is really an honor to introduce Barbara Grosh. A lot of us have gotten involved in politics in the last 2 years because of what happened in 2016. But Barbara is a second-generation member of the League of Women Voters. Her mother got involved in the 60s, the time when women were stuck at home, got bored, and the League of Women Voters put many of them to work keeping politics in their communities. We need more of those women today. Barbara got her feet wet politically in 2008 when she was inspired by the campaign of Barack Obama. It was during that campaign she fell in love with the process of registering voters. And how perfect to have her here this year when it's all things voting. She's had many a warm-hearted, occasionally tearful encounter when registering voters, especially elderly Black voters who registered for the first time in 2008. Also, persons with felony convictions registering after completing their sentences. And right now, we're looking at high school students, getting high school students registered. And Barbara worked at Brighton and with students at Fairport. And that's really exciting to register those young voters. Working with the League of Women Voters, she's run voter registration drives. While working with campaigns, she's participated in Get Out the Vote campaigns. She holds a PhD in economics from Berkeley and taught at the Medical School of Citizenship at Syracuse University. She volunteers with numerous local nonprofit groups, including acting as coordinator for Project Homeless Connect. Very busy lady, so we appreciate you taking the time to come and share with us.
So I'm going to pause for a minute in case anyone wants to bring their chair down here, because I have some tables that you're not going to be able to see from the back, and you'll have more fun if you can see the numbers.
So when that fan comes on, you can't hear it. Yeah.
Okay, so this presentation has evolved over the past few years. The League gets requests from different groups. Can you tell us what's going on in the election this year? We don't know. So that's where it comes from. So I'm going to pitch it a lot towards what's happening this year, and in particular where you might be most effective, where time spent might give you the biggest result. But then I'm also going to go into some background that will help you understand, in particular, how politics works a little bit in New York State and especially in Monroe County. Because those things are hard to understand for all sorts of people. So I'll start by saying, there's elections at 4 different levels, right? So federal, state, county, and towns. So I'm just going to march through them. Yes. Okay, let's start at the federal level. So we don't have any presidential election this year. We do have Senate and House elections. So in New York State, Senator Gillibrand is up for re-election. As far as I know, that's a shoe-in. I haven't heard anything that makes me think that that will be contended. So, if you're looking for ways to be effective, don't spend your time so I made this, I updated this slideshow 6 or 8 weeks ago, and my next one was Representative Slaughter, and I was going to give you all kinds of interesting data on what her chances for re-election are. So obviously I had to throw all that away, although I'll show you some numbers because they'll interest you. So it's, you know, the ground has completely changed now. So we're looking at a Democratic primary, which will happen in June. It looks like there will be 4 candidates who will make it to the ballot. Joe Morelli, Rachel Barnhart, Robin Wilt, and Adam McFadden. As far as I can tell, whoever gets the most votes will win. So, you know, that kind of gives me pain. I look at Robin and Adam, who I would describe as the more progressive candidates. So they're going to split the progressive vote. I would guess Rachel Barnhart might take a lot of votes away from Joe Morelli more than the progressives. So, you know, that's what's going on there. So that's a place where you could spend a lot of time and you could be very effective. So that's going to be interesting. It looks like, so the primary will definitely be in June. The governor gets to decide when to call a special election. He has not announced it yet, but the last time this kind of thing happened was when Eric Massa self-destructed shortly after being elected. And what the governor did then was to call a special election and put it on the same date as the regular election. So whoever won the special election was sworn into office like that day and served out the duration of the term, which is, what, a month and a half, 2 months. And then whoever wins the general election, held at the same time on the same ballot, would go on, and it was the same person. So I'm guessing that's how it's going to be, because if he was going to call it sooner, we might have heard of him. Yes?
The June primary, is that before or after the registering voter thing here?
After.
After?
It's the 26th.
So
The primary is the
So
26th.
we're registering the voters
People-
prior to the primary.
Yeah,
Okay, but
I don't think they can vote.
There's a regulation that you have to be registered, I think, 30 days before
Yeah.
an election.
Is there a way we could register city voters sooner?
You can do
Yes.
it today.
I mean,
Yeah, and you'd have to do it in the next month. For them to be
One
able
of
to
the
vote.
reasons we're doing the actual registration will be September and October, because there's so many city residents that we're targeting are transient, and we have to get them when they're at their current address.
I'm just thinking of the primary.
Right.
Well, it's not.
And so just to be clear, the
Oh.
June 14th event is training on
Right.
how to do voter registration,
Right.
and signing up for
For
lots
the,
of time.
for the September and October.
Not so much October, probably. The deadline is
September and October.
August and September. August and September, maybe more. Yeah, because October, it's too late.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
And of course, the whole House of Representatives is up for election every 2 years. So there's a lot of other House races that are interesting and important and could help flip the House. So you might want to choose to get involved in some of them. I have friends working in the Erie County race. What's his name? Chris Lee? Is that
Chris Collins. Well, Collins has Victor. I mean, people who live around here have Chris Collins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's got an interesting challenger that some of my friends are working hard. So you can do that. And in fact, you know, you can phone bank anywhere around the country, and that's a very interesting thing to do. So, you know, check your favorite race. I mean, there's great candidates springing up everywhere. So you're not bound to stay at home. Okay, so that's federal. Oops. Oh, hair trigger mouse here. Okay, state. We've got our 3 top state officials up for election this year. Cuomo's up for election. DeNapoli, the controller, is up for election, and Schneiderman's up for election. 6 or 8 weeks ago, I said almost he's safe. He's looking slightly less safe now than he did then. He's got a Democratic primary challenger who's been endorsed by the Working Party's family, so she will definitely be on the general election. And she's on fire. She's getting, the poll numbers are switching faster than you can imagine.
And she's Miranda, after all.
Yeah. I never even watched the show, so I didn't even recognize the name when I first watched it.
Yeah, it's Miranda.
So that's an area that you might consider if you have an opinion there. With that one, I believe that the primary will be in September. The state primaries are different from the federal primaries.
Yes.
So through the summer, you could work on one of those campaigns if you want to, and the action will come in September. Okay. Schneiderman, I haven't heard a peep about. I think he's safe. He's on fire too. But
I mean, there are people running for Republican governor, aren't there?
Right?
Right?
I'm sure there are.
And we have Pataki. I mean, we can get a Republican, especially if she splits off Working Party. We could get a Republican. We should be aware of that.
So how big is the risk there if the vote is split between Cuomo and what's her name?
Cynthia Nixon.
Nixon. Would that be a significant risk that would bring about?
No.
That would mean that the Republican candidate wouldn't necessarily have to get 50% of the vote.
Right, but how much have they gotten in the last few years? They've been more like 10 or 20%. So, given that we haven't heard yet any Republican who is exciting, I don't think it's a very big risk.
Okay.
Good.
I mean, obviously watch the news.
We're a little head shy.
Yeah, we're all shocked now. Top one. We don't believe anything anymore.
So then, at the state level, the entire Assembly and the entire Senate are up for election every 2 years, and that's a big deal. Now, they're interestingly very different, the Assembly and the Senate. And that largely comes about because they reached some sort of gentleman's agreement a long time ago, I'm not sure when, that when it came to drawing districts, they would let the Assembly draw the Assembly districts and the Senate draw the Senate districts. And they wouldn't try to undermine or challenge each other's. So the Assembly has been strongly Democratic for a long time. So they draw the map in ways that make it very easy for Democrats to get reelected. And so I predict it will stay strongly Democratic for a long time. So the races in the Assembly tend just, most of the time to go to the Democrat, especially if it's an incumbent. So there's not any really hot races locally for the Assembly that I'm aware of.
Except that Joe Morelli is losing his seat, so there will be a Morelli seat that's going to open up.
For Morelli's
Yes,
seat.
It'll just be interesting.
It will. I haven't heard who's going to... Is Joe Jr. in his district?
Jamie Romeo.
Jamie Romeo is considering?
I think she knows.
Because I think Jacqueline Richard announced that she's petitioning.
Yeah, so there'll be interest
Yeah.
there.
So Barbara, how does that work with Joe Morelli? So he's currently in the state assembly?
Yes.
And if he wins the special election for Louise Slaughter's seat...
No matter what happens, he will be out of the Assembly. He cannot run for both the Assembly and the House at the same time.
Okay.
And he's going for the House.
If he loses the primary, would he have,
Yeah, what if, right. So
okay, you'd have a week and a half.
Yeah.
You'd have a week and a half to petition if you lost the primary. The petitions are due the 12th of July.
But the petitions don't open till right about then. So
They open in June.
Yeah.
and they go to the 12th of July.
Yeah, so that
I
would
mean,
be interesting.
if he lost it, he could really quick petition conceivably.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Okay, but let's talk now about the Senate.
Can I
Yes.
ask a question? Maybe you'll get to this, but how frequently can they redraw the districts?
They do it every 10 years.
Oh, so it is. They are limited. They can't just.
Yeah, no. It's
So
it's
similar
always
to
done
that.
after the census, so the next census is in 2020, and then in 2021, they'll have the data from the census, and that's the year when they'll redraw the districts. Yeah. Okay, so the Senate has been controlled by the Republicans for quite some time, and they control the districting, and they craftily gerrymandered things to maximize their power there. Oddly enough, Governor Cuomo has been of some assistance to them in keeping control of the Senate. And the Senate, okay, so let me say first that most of the seats are safe for the incumbents. Like there's like a 95 or 98% re-election rate. If you're in a seat and you want to keep it, you mostly can. Somewhere I have oh yes, here it is. So there's a long history that progressive things get passed in the Assembly by all those Democrats, and then the Senate doesn't act. And I heard someone mention that about this abortion bill. Right? I don't think I even have that on the list here.
It is another one.
This is just a list I thought of off the top of my head. I didn't even research to get this list. But all of these things are things that were passed repeatedly over years by the Assembly and then just got totally blocked by the Senate. So the Senate is tremendously important at controlling how New York State politics goes at the state level. And so I'm going to show you some data that shows some vulnerability of our upstate Republicans here in the 3 districts that represent Monroe County. And I would like to point out these as really interesting places that you might want to spend some time. Yeah.
What's the status of the independent Democrats? Are
They were elected on a Democratic line in their district, but they don't act like Democrats.
Are they being primary?
Some of them at least are, but last time some of them were, and amazingly, our Democratic Governor Cuomo did not endorse Democrats who wanted to act with the Democratic Party. So essentially, he preserved, by doing that, Republican control.
But they just rejoined, though.
Yeah, I thought they just rejoined.
They just unified.
Yeah, I watched the whole video about it.
Independent Conference is not now working with the regular Democrats.
I mean, I don't trust him for a minute.
Yeah, I know, but there was something on the news in the
Yeah,
last 2
so
days.
they're getting scared.
Yeah, they always do.
Right?
Yeah. Non-state people.
So,
And the corrupt ones. The ones who get
okay, so here we see how great the power of gerrymandering has been. Okay, so let's look. In New York State, we have 6 million plus Democrats, 2 million plus Republicans, right? So an overwhelmingly Democratic state, and yet the Senate is on a knife's edge, right? We should have a Democratic majority in the Senate, but because of these independent Democrats, we haven't. So it's really impressive what gerrymandering can do for you. And we'll talk more about that. I've got some nice maps and stuff. Okay, so let's talk about gerrymandering. Probably most people know what it is, but you might not have the clearest picture how it works. So here's a theoretical map of a district, which is 40% red and 60% blue, right? And we can see now how you could draw the lines in different ways to get different outcomes, all right? So in the first, the second diagram, they've drawn the districts up and down, right? So it gives a fair outcome in the sense that the number of seats that goes to each party is proportional to their overall in the population. However, it's not really particularly desirable in the sense that every single district is totally non-competitive, right? So you don't really have multi-party democracy in any one of those districts. You don't get a choice between candidates, probably, because you can't win depending on which party you're in, so you don't bother to run. And we're going to see that that happens in Monroe County all the time with our county legislature. Okay, so that would be one way to draw it. Then the next one over looks kind of fair in that every district is competitive, and yet they've shared out all the minority members into every district so that they can't win any district. So that's not particularly fair either. So both of those are extremes of how you can bias it towards one party or the other. And then you get the last one, where you get much more complicated districts, right? And usually when you see, when you start seeing districts as funny shaped as these, your alarm bells should just be going off, right? There's nothing natural about this. This was drawn to give you a result. And in this case, what they did is to divide up the majority members, right, the blue people, pack them into a smaller number of districts. And so we're conceding a couple of districts to the blue people, who should be the majority, but the reds can control the majority of the districts. And this is exactly what the Republicans have become masters at over the last 10 years. They started this in 2011. They have high-powered consultants who help them draw these maps. They've done it all over the country. So if you see the numbers, like they control a number of both, state-level House and Senate seats and U.S. House seats. That's vastly out of proportion to the numbers of voters. So that's the kind of thing that has made such a big difference in putting us where we are today. There is some hope because the Supreme Court has had a series of decisions on gerrymandering that have gone the way I would like them to go, which is they've thrown out a bunch of these maps. And I understand there's a couple more cases coming their way towards the Supreme Court. So some mathematicians really sat down and started talking very mathematical talk about what makes a fair district and what doesn't. And apparently, although I can't explain it, they can actually explain it in words that Supreme Court justices could understand. So there is the possibility that we're going to get a court decision which will mean that after the 2020 census, we'll never have exactly as bad a situation as we've had this last time. So that's hope.
Is New York one of the states that's coming up before the Supreme Court?
No, it's not. So
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania is, but I believe it's
Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Maryland.
Wisconsin, yeah.
Wisconsin and Maryland, yeah. So interestingly enough, at the federal level, New York has the best redistricting imaginable because, I talked about the gentleman's agreement between the Senate and the House and the Republicans and the Senate and Assembly. There's no such agreement about federal districts. So the Assembly and the Senate fought and they kept coming up with maps and they kept vetoing each other's maps. And time ran out. We needed districts, and so some federal judge drew our districts. And so we have really good, nonpartisan drawn districts. Yes?
Weren't those districts based on common cause map?
Yes, they were. Yeah. And it actually, we can point to exactly the kind of difference it made. If you remember back in the aughts, Louise Slaughter's district was called the Headphones District, right? It had Rochester, and it had a little tiny piece up by the lake, and then it had Buffalo. So those were two dense urban areas that tend to grow Democratic, and so she had a very safe district. But after the judge drew the boundaries, we got Monroe County pretty much whole, and it's a much more balanced district, and she came close to losing one or two elections. So it really did have its effect of making politics more contestable.
And when she had that weird one, we progressives in Brighton were with what is now Tom Reed, right? Which wasn't bad at the time because it was Amo Houghton. Amo Houghton, when we first, he was okay.
Right.
You know, he was an old school Republican.
Then we have Randy Cool.
But then we got all the rest of those idiots in a big row. But yeah, that was, but that's how bad it was. They said, oh, those Democrats, we're going to put them with all.
Yep. Okay, so just for fun, I'll show you some of our gerrymandered districts. Look at the shape of that thing. It's a question mark. I mean,
yeah. Is that Harry's?
This is Harry's seat.
Harry's, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's really funny.
And actually, I mean, it's one of the less safe seats, right? Harry did not have an overwhelming victory a couple of years ago. It was an interesting race. We had 2 Democrats in the primary, 2 Republicans in the primary, and we didn't get those other times. All right. Now let's talk about the gerrymandering and the Senate. And here they were so crafty. I just take my hat off to how crafty those Republicans were. So notice, this is the 55th district, currently held by Funky. So what do you notice about that? Well, they carved out Brighton. They took Brighton by sensible rules should have been in his district, so they took it out. So, I'll show you some numbers in a few minutes, but they were able to carve out a bunch of Democrats and get rid of them for the district to make it easier for a Republican to win. Okay, so then I had to do something with those Democrats, right? So now let's see what happened in Robach's district. So this one, is just barely legal. I mean, the districts have to, connect. You can't have an island and an island. So there's a narrow corridor that makes these 2 disjoint things legal. But so basically he got a bunch of Democrats from Funky's district, and then to keep that from overwhelming him, then they carved out this piece on the west side of the city to get rid of those Democrats so that Robach could still hold his district. And then they put those into the 61st district, which Ransomhofer holds. So, it's a big rural district full of Republicans, so they can throw in those people from the U of R neighborhood and outvote them every time. So that was really a magnificent piece of gerrymandering. And you saw those knife-edge votes, right? This makes the difference. These 3 seats could flip and give New York a Senate that would pass the kind of abortion law we saw, could make fracking illegal, all kinds of
Same-day registration.
Same-day registration, yes. Okay, so where are we going?
Do you think those races are contestable? Like the Funky maybe?
Well, yeah, I have some numbers on that, so let me bring them up so you can see. All right, so here's why you move down. These numbers are hard to see. So, let's first just look at general Monroe County data. So what you see here, and all of this will be familiar to you from how you know things work. So we've got the city and we've got the suburbs, right? So the city is about 40% black and 40% white, and the other 20% something else. And it's overwhelmingly Democratic. It's like 80% Democratic, and 10% Republican, and 10% other. And then in the suburbs, it's quite different, right? First of all, it's almost all white, right? How many of you live in the city? Okay, so some of you do, and so the rest of you are in the suburbs. So, I live in the suburbs too. Basically, we suburbanites are a product of the white flight of the 60s and 70s, right? We are the inheritors of white supremacy and not wanting to have to
redlining and all
the
that
whole
stuff,
nine
right?
yards.
Yeah.
So we should.
Although we're a little more mixed in Brighton.
Right, it's a little more. But that's our heritage. Okay, so at the county level, we have a pretty substantial dominance of Democrats over Republicans, right? It's 180,000 versus 128,000. So you would think, oh, this is a Democratic county. The Democrats should control this county. And yet, not at all. Okay, so notice the large number of what we call blank voters. So these are people who are not registered in any party. And there's almost as many of them as there are Republicans. So they are a very powerful faction in Monroe County. Pretty much, they decide things, right? You assume that most people who register Democratic probably vote Democratic almost all the time. Those who register Republican probably vote Republican almost all the time. And it's those blank voters who really decide how elections go. And those people, they don't feel affiliated with the party, they don't like the parties, they don't like the way the parties operate. I actually can identify with plenty of that because there's so much shenanigans that goes on. They don't tend to be nearly as informed because they don't care about party stuff, so they don't listen to that. And they're kind of just there, right? So they're swayable, I think. So on the whole, in Monroe County, they have traditionally gone with the Republicans, but they didn't choose to register with the Republicans, and they're not committed to the Republicans. And so at this juncture in time, when so many people, get heartburn every time they listen to the news or read a newspaper, that's really who you might want to be working on. And I noticed, I gave that list of people who moved me when they registered to vote. At the March for Life, I was getting a bunch of people who had never been in a party who wanted to re-register so they could be in a party. And that made me tear up. They're realizing that they need to get more involved and be more principled. Okay, so if you look at on these bottom two lines, I've got the data for 55th and 56th district. And so there's a lot more Democrats than Republicans in either of those districts. There's also a lot of blank voters. So they are susceptible to a Democratic candidate if there's a strong one and if there's a lot of campaign volunteers who will really work hard. Like I said, incumbents almost always win, so it's definitely an uphill battle, but it's not impossible. And Senator Funke's only been there, 2.5 terms? We had Ted O'Brien the term before that, and we had David Kuhn before that, and they were both Democrats. So it could happen. And in the 6 or 8 weeks since I last did this presentation, they announced who the Democratic challenger is. Jen Lunsford, and she seems to be a credible person. So if she can build a campaign team, it's possible. I'm not so sure that they've got a good challenger to Robach.
They do.
Do they? Who do they have?
Jeremy Cooney.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm not.
because I've heard Ann
I was going to ask
Lewis,
who
but
that.
she's not that good.
Who is it?
Jeremy Cooney. So he was Lovely Warren's
Chief of Staff.
chief of staff for a number of years.
Oh.
He really knows how to work things around here. That's very interesting. Oh, okay. So that's 2 races that I commend to you as really worth your time if you want to make a difference in New York State politics. elections.
Mhm.
Okay. So what I just said about those two districts also applies to the 25th district, which is there's a lot more Democrats than Republicans, but there's such a large number of non-party voters that it's a bit of a crapshoot. It really could go either way depending on what they do.
And the thing is that Louise had a lot of Republican followers.
She did.
I campaigned for her. Republicans I'd go to their houses and they were like, yes, I'm voting for Louise.
Mm-hmm.
We can't assume that anymore now.
Yeah. So, we definitely are going to have to work hard. And I'll show you some figures again about how true that is when we get to turnout. Yeah.
You just.
Turnout?
Turnout is exactly
Okay,
that.
so let's go on to look at those figures. Okay. Where's my yes, let's see.
Feels hopeless under
Right. No,
Now this is county now. Just before there.
I think you can just use page down or page up.
Here we go. Okay, let's talk about turnout, and I'm going to focus on Louise's seat now. Okay, so what I want to tell you, and I'll show you some maps that will really draw it home, is turnout differs from year to year dramatically. Okay, it's highest during presidential races, no surprise, and it's a lot less than that during the off-year elections, and it's a tiny fraction during the odd-year elections. Okay, so look at what that means. So let's look at 2012. That was a presidential election year, right? So Louise was challenged by Maggie Brooks, who, was a powerful candidate. You might have thought it would have been possible that she would win, but because 2012 was a presidential year and turnout was high, and now I'll get to a more complicated story, which is that Republicans are just steady turtle voters, right? They register as soon as they move to a new house, and then they vote. They just think that's their civic duty. They always register, they always vote. And I'm going to show you the numbers to support that. Democrats are the hare, right? So in Democratic areas, the registration rates are much lower, and the turnout rates are dramatically fluctuate over the political cycle. So it's a big deal what year your election is. So in 2012, even though Maggie Brooks is a really strong candidate, she didn't really come particularly close to unseating Louise. Okay, 2 years later, who do we have? We have Mark Cassini running. Now, Mark Cassini is a nice guy, but he was nobody. And like the Republican Party, Bill Ryder didn't care who ran. Like, it's like, you want to do that, Mark? You got to waste your summer? Okay, go for it. But they had no idea that they could win. And yet, look what happened. He was within a percentage point of upsetting her. And that is purely because Democrats stayed home. And you can look at the figures here. The Republicans stayed home too, but the Democrats stayed home more. And so, that was a wake-up call. That's when I first started looking at how inconsistent the behavior of Democrats and Republicans is.
Jen Lunsford made the point that year Mark Cassini personally knocked on 8,000 doors.
He did. He was a hard worker.
And that's what makes a huge difference is the personal
Yeah.
talking to people.
And you know what? He's almost as nice as Louise is in the sense that people who interact with him really like him, just like anyone who'd ever worked with Louise on anything really liked her.
Which is what they say about Jim Maxwell, who's running against
Okay,
us.
so-
Yeah, he's a doctor and everyone loves him, who has him.
Great.
He's wonderful.
You know, I got to tell you, when I hear a neurosurgeon that's never been in politics once in office,
Ben
I think,
Carson.
"Oh,
You've heard of him.
Yeah.
wasn't there?"
Yeah, we already have one of those. Yeah, I know. I know, right?
Is Maxwell all of that?
Nice one.
Okay.
He's not a surgeon. He's just a.
No, he's a neurosurgeon.
He's a neurosurgeon. Yeah, he's the same thing.
Just like Ben
Same
Carson.
thing.
Yeah.
Same thing as Ben Carson. Yeah.
It was Ted O'Brien knocked on every door too, but he lost in 14, having won, and it all came down to the turnout in
Yes.
his district.
Okay.
And we've got to get.
Because in 12, people came out to vote for Obama,
Right.
and while they were there, they went down
Exactly.
the road.
Right down the
Right.
line.
Right.
And that would be a factor for Jen, whether she can
Mhm.
unseat Funky.
Yeah.
So then notice again in 2016, another presidential year, all the Democrats come back. Louise sails through, even though, he's known by a lot more people, and we might have thought he could build, but that's not how it works. Okay, so let me see what I'm covering. Oh yeah, so that's the state level. So let me just pause and see if people have other questions or discussion on the state level before we turn to the county level.
I was wondering about, instead of just talking about gerrymandering, what about election systems? So instead of voting for pairwise candidates, there are election systems that you vote for four people at once. And my favorite is something called ranked choice voting, which minimizes the number of wasted votes.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an option in New York State, or?
I'm afraid not. All of those, first of all, they tend to weaken parties versus non-partisan. So, one of my favorites is the primary that's not a partisan primary. So in California, if you run for the House, everyone's in the same primary. Louisiana even does this. Everyone's in the same primary. In the top two, there might be some rules on you have to get a certain percent, are in the general election. And so you could have 2 Democrats make it to the general or 2 Republicans make it to the general. So party affiliation doesn't mean the same thing in that system. And it gives less of a attraction to the parties becoming extreme because you don't have to win in a party to get further. So all of those beautiful election reforms that would make it more democratic are probably not going to be able to pass in New York because the Assembly will never pass anything that weakens the Democratic Party. And
And ironically, that's why you like them.
There's also a bunch of other reforms that tend to help Democrats that could pass in New York State. So, like a lot of states now have it so that if you get a driver's license, you automatically get registered to vote unless you opt out. And I believe New York State is on the road to getting there. We could have early voting. That tends to favor Democrats. We could have no excuse absentee ballots. That tends to favor Democrats. So those kind of things will increase turnout overall and skew it towards Democrats. So they may well get passed. And I've heard that the Board of Elections, the Democrat at the Board of Elections, Tom Ferrazzi, is really pretty optimistic about some of those passing.
How about nonpartisan redistricting?
Yeah, again, I don't think it's going to go past. Yep.
I ask this from every speaker.
Yes. Has anyone disagreed with me yet?
Some actually have.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. I don't like being cynical. Okay, so let's talk about the county. The county is really important to people's lives, and yet it's kind of hard to get your hands around and understand and feel where you can work at the county level. So let's talk about why that is. First, let's see why it's so important. Right? It's got $1 billion budget, and it controls all the social safety nets for poor people, and both decides what the budget is and then administers it. So they can make life miserable for poor people. So all you have to do is look at the daycare subsidies, right? We have programs that say that people below certain income levels are entitled to subsidized daycare, but they've only put enough money in the budget to fund 10 or 20% of them. So basically they can just ignore. And they get to do your paperwork to decide if you qualify for Medicaid or food stamps or housing subsidies and all of that, and they can really make your life happy. They control the MCC budget, they control the bus system, all these things that really could make a difference to the lives of poor people are controlled by the county, which is overwhelmingly Republican. So, the county exec's been a Republican for 20, 25, 30 years, something like that. The county clerk has been a Republican. Right now, we have a Democratic county clerk, and that's kind of a fluke, and I'm glad he got reelected this year, but, that's a delicate thing. And now let's talk about the county legislature. Yes?
I don't, maybe this is obvious to me, but I'm not sure. Why is the county going Republican? What's producing that?
That's an interesting question, because we saw the numbers, that
Right.
there's a lot more Democrats than Republicans. And it's because the non-aligned voters, by and large, have voted Democratic or Republican.
And how often do they come up for, and are they up? Are any of these people up?
Okay, so I think almost all the positions are four-year positions.
Okay.
So, and this is very clever. So in 2011, they had to redistrict at the county level, just like at the state level. So they drew themselves some new districts that favored Republicans, and they had every seat run in 2011. And so they won them all, because 2011 is not...
It's an off year.
It's an off
So it's
year.
always an off year.
Yeah. And so then 4 years later, they all had to run again. That's 2015, another off year. And they're not up this year. They'll have to all
But
run
they'll
next
be up
year.
next year.
And that'll be an off year.
Right. But
So they
still
count,
do something.
Yes, we could do something, yes.
they count on
Yes.
the low turnout.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who decides when and how often they have elections?
That's a good question. So I believe there's a county charter.
What was the question?
Who decides when and how often they have elections? I think that's probably set in the county charter, which has been around for a few years. They amended it a year or two ago, made some minor revisions, but since they control the legislature and they're the ones to amend it, it's a really hard slog to do any challenge there.
Are there challengers to the races?
Let me show you them.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the list of the 29 districts in 2015, the last time when they all had to run. So the ones that had check marks had 2 candidates running. So there, out of 29 districts, there were 9 districts where you had two-party democracy and you got to choose between.
I mean, that just means Democrats, right? There weren't Democrats in any of the other districts, then, presumably.
No, that's not quite true.
Oh, some of them
I'm
went
going to show you a map that
Democratic?
shows who gets which districts.
I thought they all went Republican, though.
No, they mostly
they
go
don't.
Republican.
Oh, they didn't.
The
Yeah, I'll
Republicans
show you
control
that.
it.
So out of the 29, I think 9 of them are Democrat.
Okay.
That seems coincidence that those are not the same. I'm not sure about that. Yeah, it's about 2/3 Republican, about 1/3 Democrat. Despite the fact that numerically there's a lot more Democrats than Republicans. So there were only 9 districts where it was considered at all worthwhile to run. And the 4 that are highlighted in yellow are the only 4 where someone thought there's some possibility that it could change hands. So only 4 real competitive districts out of 29. Now I did a map.
How long have the Republicans had a lock on Monroe County?
So I think the last Democrat who was the county exec was Tom Fry. Was that in the 80s? Somebody might remember him. I don't. It was before my time. Or even the late 70s. I'm not sure.
80s was Tom Fry?
80s, yeah.
Wow. 30 years. 30-something years. Wow.
He's up, right? He's turned out.
Who is?
Okay, so
The county executive, who is our county? Oh, Dinolfo. Dinolfo? Dinolfo? I don't know who
He's the
Dinolfo.
president, the person that.
okay, so what I've done here,
I don't know who that
this is a map that shows the 29 districts. So the ones that are blue are controlled by Democrats.
Oh, Daniele.
And you can see they're in the city, and I showed you that in the city, 80% of voters are Democrats. So those are very safe.
I don't know.
Those are going to go to the Democrats.
I didn't
The
think
ones that
that
are
one.
red are very safe Republican seats, and the ones that are
Not bad.
purple are the 4 that were considered conceivable that a Democratic challenger could win. None of them did, but someone thought it was conceivable. Okay. So essentially, we don't have two-party democracy in Monroe County.
Well, it looked like on that chart, what was happening was the ones that where the Democrats were in, the Republicans didn't bother.
Exactly.
So they know that that's a Democrat one, they don't
Yeah.
bother.
Right.
And those are the gimmies.
Yep.
And then the
And
ones,
most of the Republican seats, the Democrats didn't bother. A few they did.
a few they did and they lost.
Yeah, they all lost. 100% lost. Yeah. And I mean, some of them are conceivable. So, like this purple one down below is Henrietta, and so that was 2016. Henrietta was a very interesting town because they had a Democratic challenger for every seat. The Republicans controlled everything, the supervisor, the town, the whole town board, the county ledge seats. But the Democrats did field a challenger to every one of them. And they asked us at the league if we could put together a debate to, try to help have democracy. And the Republicans refused to debate. So that's a usual thing, is that if you think you're a front runner, then you don't want publicity, you don't want debates. So they put on a credible show, but they didn't actually make it over the hump. But then 2 years later they did, right? They elected a Democrat or two and this past year.
If you have a debate and the other party doesn't show up, does it help if you have a large audience? Can you get airtime to show?
Well, so it depends who's sponsoring the debate. So the League of Women Voters has some rules, which is we don't have what we call empty seat debates. Mm-hmm. So they have to agree in advance that they're going to come, and we have a bunch of rules that they have to agree to, and there will be some procedures, like will we give you some questions in advance, or will they all be on the fly, and audience get to ask questions, or who so we won't hold a debate unless that's agreed by both parties. So what you're envisioning there is not something that we would do. Somebody could do it, but no one has.
Having a town hall meeting for Chris Collins where Chris Collins doesn't show up, but you still have a rally.
Yeah,
And you still have
I mean,
people asking
people can call rallies, yeah. The Democrats could have called rallies, but they wouldn't be debates, they'd be rallies, and the same people wouldn't come and they wouldn't serve the same functions. Now, you get places like WXXI, they will interview every candidate on the ballot, so they'll get both parties if there's challengers, and if there's no challengers, then they'll still talk to the majority. Like, we would never have a debate in a district where there's no challenge, but XXI will do that. So, depends who you're talking about. Yeah. We also have a rule that any candidate who can get onto the ballot must be invited to the debate. Okay, you guys there's a lot of you old enough, you might remember the days when the League of Women Voters ran all the presidential debates. Those good old days. Why did that stop? Because John Anderson got on a lot of ballots, and so the League said he's got to be invited to the debate, and the party said, no, we won't come if you bring him. So that we lost the coordinating role for debates at that point. So, and that gets interesting. Like, the Greens get on the ballots around here. You know, they're not going to win county level races. But, you know, we had, Maggie and Louise and Rajesh. And, you know, we do these things. Or, no, it was Maggie and Sandra Frankel and Rajesh. And he gets just as much time as they do. Yeah. All right, so let me see if I can get back to a browser.
Down at the bottom.
No, that's not where I want to be. Yeah, that'll do it. What's your business? All right, I'm going to close this.
There's a tab that goes up at the bottom if you go all the way down.
All right, can I type here?
Yeah, just type in.
So, we have a great app on our website that you all might enjoy playing around with. So, we wanted to see how turnout varies by district. So we did a data project where we took the county voter registration rolls, and so that's got everybody's address. So we can tell what census district each person is in, and we can match that with census data on how many people live in those districts. So doing that, we were able to get things like what registration is like by census tract, and what turnout is like by census tract. So on this map, the darker it is, the higher is the registration rate. This is good. Yeah, these are registered voters.
Is that what it is? I was
Okay,
going to say,
so
what's
if
the
we
big white
look-
desert? Is it RIT, Mark?
Are the white?
Yeah, what's the white?
Are the white?
Yeah,
Is that
the
the
white-
colleges?
Colleges?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Good
the
guess.
airport. The airport.
And
Oh, the airport,
they-
okay.
They never
Okay.
vote at the airport.
No.
Okay, so here I clicked on a Center City tract, and so you can see that of the eligible adults, 44% are registered to vote. Registered, okay? So then in a presidential year, you can see that about 55% of registered voters turn out to vote. So that's the peak, right? That's the most voters. So
1 in 5 people?
yeah, roughly 1 in 5 people. That's the peak. All right, so if we look at the trough, we got 10% of registered voters turning out. That's the year the county elections are held. 10% of the registered, so that's 4% of the population is deciding who gets those county leg seats. So that, in a nutshell, is how the Republicans control the county seats. Now, on the other hand, let's look at the suburbs. So 100% of eligible adults registered to vote in this district that's
Parenting.
Fairfield, Parenton. And in the presidential year, about 80% of them turned out to vote. And in the off year,
Wow.
it was still 60% who turned out to vote.
What's that little line number?
Now, in that tiny, tiny year, there probably wasn't even an election. Because in the odd number of years, in some districts, there won't even be an election. So some of those
Or they're
voters-
running unopposed or whatever, so yeah, you don't even
Yeah,
vote.
but
Yeah,
even-
yes, yeah.
Republicans will still turn out for those.
Really?
I mean, all the town elections, basically, for years, in most suburbs have been unopposed, and they still go out and vote. Yeah. I mean, not as big as during a presidential year or a congressional year, but they're the turtles. They just keep chugging along.
Well, good for them.
Yeah, I'm not criticizing them.
Yeah, you know, right? I mean, we could say a nice thing about Republicans.
What's the light blue area in the bottom, the lower lower voter registration area in the, I don't know, is that?
Over here?
Yeah.
I think that's East Rochester.
Oh, that would make sense, sure. Yep.
So it's very much tied to income level. It's not just race or anything else. So East Rochester is a pretty poor area. So I showed you that map that had one sort of contestable county leg seat down on the lower right. That's actually where I live. So I talked to my county legislator one time, and she told me that her district, which covers part of East Rochester and most of this area out here, has the biggest variation in income level of any seat. So she said when she was campaigning out around Turk Hill, where she lives, the property tax that people were paying on their houses was about comparable to the family income in East Rochester. So she was looking at an incredibly diverse electorate. That's not very common. There's not many seats in anywhere that are that diverse, but that happens to be the one I live in, so that's how I know that East Rochester looks a lot like a city district in that
Are there
sense.
maps like this for the whole state?
Nope, not that I know of. Yeah, the league just commissioned us for Rochester, Monroe County.
I just want to clarify something on the map. So that's the percentage of voters that are registered, right? That's what the number. Is that what I'm
The
looking?
colors are the
Like
percent.
dark is higher.
So we've got both of them here, right? So
Yeah.
up here is the percent that are registered.
Right.
And then the bar graph is the turnout of registered.
But just the
that's-
colored map.
The colored map is
Okay,
registered.
but that's total turnout and that's
Yeah.
total registration.
Right.
Is that broken out by party now?
By what?
Party?
No,
Because that would be extremely interesting.
it would be.
Because
And I would also like to see
That
it
would
like
tell you
by
where to
Senate
focus.
district.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to redo this in another year or two and on our wish list. But this is on the website and you're welcome to play around like find it a lot of fun. So when you're thinking about what to put time into, turnout for a lot of things is going to be key. So if you think of Louisa's seat, which I still think of as Louisa's seat, turnout, especially in the city, will make all the difference in the world. And you just look at this map and you see that you can't take turnout for granted. Turnout's a hard rock to push up a hill. It is hard to get turnout. But that's where the action is. So I don't have any wisdom on how to increase turnout. I don't feel like anything we've ever tried really is trying to do. But that's where the action Yeah, this year is very atypical, so I think there's hope this year that there hasn't been in long years.
Hackers have been going.
Yeah.
Terror.
But it's saying yes to things, instead of just anger, to really vote for somebody is really
Right, and I mean, I've done so much registration over the years, and even to convince people to register, like they're just full of, oh, they're all the same, they're all taxes.
I know.
You know, so you face that at registration, and then you face it again at turnout. And I mean, how did Hillary lose? It's because people are, she's the same.
No, Hillary lost because they changed the voter access rules in Wisconsin, gerrymandered it, and threw Wisconsin for Trump. It was in the paper.
Yeah, but it was much closer than it should.
Yeah, oh yes, much closer than it should have been.
And that attitude, which I'm so used to, was being expressed in so many places.
About student registration in university colleges.
So the rules are that college students get to choose. So they can register where they grew up, which they might consider their long-run address, or if they want to, they can register where they go to college. So there's actually websites out there that will point out to you how you might be more powerful, which of those choices you make. So, for example, during the Obama campaigns, we were registering voters, New York students who might be away at college, and we had to say, if you're going out of state, you might consider registering there because New York's going to go for the Democrats. And, you would be more powerful if you're going to Pennsylvania or Ohio in particular. You would go there. So that's a calculation that each student has to make. And then if they vote, so they may then have to get an absentee ballot, which is a procedural hurdle that they don't all jump through. Speaking as a mother of a recent college graduate, they might need to make that happen.
So we're expected to see higher voter turnout this election. Like we're all thinking that and hoping that. Is there a way we can think about capitalizing on that for the future? We don't want to see big voter turnout this election and then, how can we capitalize that for just 2019 in terms of Monroe County? Are there ways to think about?
Well, this is how I would think about it. Like something like whether you register and whether you vote has an awful lot to do with whether people register and vote, right? So I think social networks makes a heck of a difference. So I look at this lovely group of people who I'm very delighted to see coming to life politically, and it's a pretty white group. So if you're working on turnout in the city, don't just get them to vote this time. Get them to come to a candidate forum or help petition for something, or do some step that will take them beyond and make them feel powerful and build a connection into the political system for them.
Building that into voter registration somehow.
Yeah.
If it's possible.
Now, I had some ideas about it, which seemed good to me at the time, that we never followed through on. So, for example, when they register to vote, the league for a while had a little post-it kind of thing that said, would you like to be reminded of the next election? And so we got people to opt into that. And our thinking was, we'll send out a mass email or a mass text, because young people today don't email. We didn't really follow through in a particularly effective way. But it turned out to be hard because I showed you how non-contested our elections are. So we didn't have the information on where everyone lived. So a blanket message that there's an election doesn't tell them if there's an election that's of any interest to them. So you would need a much more sophisticated system to start getting them interested. And really what you need is a system where they opted in not just to get a reminder of an election, but some news about the election, some political news. And that's a much harder ask because do they trust you? I mean, why would they? So So it's a non-trivial thing. I think as I look at it, to succeed, you're really going to have to build ties with groups that they do belong to and do trust, and that's a difficult and long-term thing. I mean, I spend a lot of time talking with black churches in the city, and there's so much distrust. It just doesn't happen overnight. You have to work together year after year and get it right every time. Never have them feel that you betrayed them, like the Henrietta Democrats felt we betrayed them because we couldn't get a debate. It's a difficult, long-term thing. Yes?
Some candidates have done things with voter registration where they'll have the person who's registering fill out a postcard and address it to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And on that postcard, there's a website that says, if you go to the website's in there showing who's running in your district, and then it's tied, they can punch into the website to find out who the candidates are. That seems to maybe have an impact because it's in your own handwriting.
I think that's a good idea.
And you have them sign,
Right.
I promise I will vote.
Yep.
On this day.
And I've seen it where they have to say what issues make it important to them to vote, so
right.
they're
So
reminding themselves.
So when you put that into a postcard and you sign it, and then the person mails it to you 2 weeks before the election, oh, right, I promised.
Right.
And promises matter to people.
They do. And so if you can sway a few people that wouldn't have voted to vote, and they do talk to their friends, right? And if their friends weren't going to
I
vote,
would have them promised to
yeah.
have 5 people with them.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea. Now, the league puts together the electronic voter guide that tries to, and I can tell you that that's a very disappointing voter guide because most of the elections locally are uncontested, and we often can't get one or the other of the candidates, even where they are contested, to participate in the voter guide. So the overwhelming number of people who would go to that website will not find it that inspirational or compelling.
But I know that there are websites that will, you put in your zip code.
Yeah, oh, we got that. And you put in your address, it'll tell you exactly who's on your ballot.
So even that information would be helpful.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, that's the other thing I wanted to say about county elections. It's really hard to be an informed voter. Like, how many of you can tell me what county ledge district you're in?
Yeah, I was going to say, I have no idea.
Right? You're all really involved people, and you don't know. I mean, I didn't know until my neighbor down the street was my county ledge representative. It's just the news media doesn't sort news that way. I mean, even if that person somehow got in the newspaper, you wouldn't know that was your representative, so you don't store that information. So actually, some kind of, you were talking about tracking votes and publicizing what's been decided. I mean, something like that over the long run could make a difference. Again, it's hard because so little is contested. So, like, I could give you a list that showed, the Republicans vote the way the county exec tells them every time, and I can say that for every one of them. And it's not that inspiring to anyone, right? And if the contest isn't contested, then what would you do with that information, even if you didn't like it? So they've been very clever at erecting barriers to make it hard to make a difference.
But that's what they've done. It doesn't seem right.
No, it's not. It drives me crazy. Yeah. Somebody over here have a question?
I was just going to say, when I registered high school students this year, I think because of Parkland students, they're so much more aware, and they were already talking about whether they would vote in their college community out of state, or whether they would, there was that discussion. So they're thinking about where they're going to make an impact.
And you know what? At every time, but especially at this time, if you are deciding where to spend your time, like if you can get a young person to register and vote, they will probably keep voting, right? Whereas if you don't catch them, they may not register until they're in their mid-30s. the registration rates for young people are very low, but the ones that do sign up keep voting. So that's a good place to spend your time. And, if you're being strategic around here, go to the downtown MCC campus. Get those people excited about voting. And there you could possibly really build some relationships. There are some political action groups on campus, and you could get involved with them and support them and make them feel that they can be part of the county-wide system, and that'll be infectious because it does spread from person to person. People who don't know anyone who votes don't think they should vote, and people who, every time they go to a family event, listen to an argument about politics, think, yeah, okay, voting's something people like me do. It's very much a viral model.
I got a question that I'm not entirely sure you can answer. It's about political fundraising. Do you know of anything like an app which says, okay, this is the budget that I have to give to political campaigns? How would I distribute those funds in order to make them the most effective? Kind of.
I haven't heard of anything like that. That would be an interesting idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'd have to check off your values, and then it would have to match them against the person,
And then you have to
right?
decide what your purview is. I sometimes donate to people all around the country. And
Yeah, I give money to Beto O'Rourke.
if I hear about a race, like when that Senate race in Alabama, I was donating down there. And then I get on mailing lists of candidates who I don't remember. They never identify in their mailings. I live in this state and I'm running for this office. So months and years later, I'm still getting mail from people. I have no idea. Most people don't do that. Most people would only contribute to people that they could vote for. So you need to factor that in.
But I think increasingly people, I do it because I see it on Facebook. Like I said, Beto O'Rourke got some money from, not a lot of money, I gave him $10 or something, but the point is, $10 here and $10 there from all over the country. That's how Obama did it.
Exactly.
So I think my daughter gave Beto O'Rourke money.
Yeah, my daughter does too.
So, and it's because of Facebook. We all see these things.
Right.
Or Instagram if you're young.
Right now, there's a race going on in Arizona that could be pretty close. So her name is Ural Turpaneni or something like that. Mm-hmm. I intend to give tomorrow. And of course, I gave it to the one who won in Pennsylvania recently. What's his name? Yeah.
Who won?
And then you also have to decide, do I choose my own candidates or do I, because there's a Democratic committee to flip the Senate. Do I trust them to decide? So there's a lot of questions you have to factor in.
While we're on fundraising, I heard from a credible source that Jim Maxwell, the rich neurosurgeon, threw $500,000 of his own dollars into his campaign, and the Republican overlords gave another $1 million, right? So he's got a lot of money.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to rise to the occasion for.
He's been laying low on what his positions are, I must say.
Yeah, his position is that I'm a Republican. I'm a doctor. I'm a nice guy. That's all I've heard.
Well, I guess early on, there's no point. He can only do
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a partial answer to your question. Are you familiar with the organization called Swing Left?
I am not.
Okay. Well, if you give to them, and they do other things, they also go knocking on doors and registering people and so on. But if you give to their fund, they they wait until in each race until the primaries are over, and then they give to the Democrat who won the primary. And so if you give to them, they know which, and they only pick district. They only focus on districts that they consider swingable. They won't give any money where there's no point. So indirectly, you can achieve what you're doing.
That's a good suggestion. There is a Swing Left group around here.
Yes. Yeah, I've been to one of their meetings.
So, I mean, another thing we could talk about if we're talking about being effective, an awful lot of campaigning is done through phone banking these days,
Yes.
which, you know, I first did it in 2008, and in that election it felt important to me. People would answer the phone. They didn't necessarily know who was calling because we didn't all have caller ID on every phone in those days. And I had some really great conversations. Like, I remember when the Texas primary was happening. So they have a complicated system in Texas where they have an election where you go in a booth and fill out an election, you know, a ballot. And then in the evening they have, what do they call those things? Where everyone shows up. A caucus. And you have to have gone to vote during the day to be admitted to the caucus. And, you know, no one understands the rules. So we were calling registered Democrats to make sure that they understood the rules so that we could increase the turnout for the election part, but then let them know that really they should also go. And especially we were calling black districts because I was working for Obama, and it was new news to them, and they valued that we had taken the time to call them and patiently explain it, and like that felt good. But in the years since then, like every time I've done it, it's gotten less satisfying, and no one answers calls from numbers they don't recognize anymore. And also, something that was very aggravating was they weren't necessarily good with the data. So you'd be given a call list, you go through it, and somebody else would be given the same call list, or several other people might get the same call list. So the same person might get 4 calls in an evening from the same campaign. So by the time you got them, they're so angry at your campaign, you're like, oh God, I'm hurting things rather than helping things. So
I participated in a text bank with the and that was very rewarding. I was able to send out 100 texts, and I got 30 responses, and then I texted back and forth between those people. So I didn't have to talk to them on the phone. If they didn't want to be bothered, they just didn't respond.
That would be more effective today.
And it was through your computer, right? You didn't have to use your thumbs. You have a computer keyboard to do it. Yeah, it was really great.
So it's evolving, is what I'm saying, and I can only guess it will keep evolving. I'm actually in positions now where I'm supposed to be nonpartisan, so I don't tend to
can't do it
anymore. Also, I hated it the last few times I did it, so I don't do it. But
one of the other things that you can think about doing if you have the time is adopt a voter program, where you get the registered list for your district or neighborhood that you want to focus on, and contact them ahead of time, so they want to have a conversation. You go back, and then you're developing a little bit of a relationship, and saying,
that's
when you talk to them the weekend before the election, remind them, do you need a ride? What do you need? How can I help you get to the polls? And that sort of thing.
And I've discovered in the years I've been working with the league, like, there's a lot of things that I had never imagined. Like, people are afraid to vote. So, what do you mean by that? And, like, first of all, they don't know what the process is going to be, and they're nervous. And they don't want to look stupid, and they don't want to make a mistake, and they don't want to have to ask questions of someone that they don't know what their input is. So the more you can prepare them. So one thing that I wish were easier to do, but like in theory, the Board of Elections is willing to bring voting machines to venues and, you know, show you what a ballot looks like, show you how it goes into the machine, so that a new voter knows what they're going to face. So that fear factor that I was surprised to discover wouldn't be a factor. Now, in fact, I've never seen it done because just before the election, the Board of Elections is dying under their workload. They're processing all the absentee ballot requests and all the last-minute registrations, and so they won't do it just before the election. They'll only do it way out. But if you are involved in any groups where, say, in June or July, when there's not actual elections going on, you could bring these things to public places, or that would be an excellent thing to do.
What about coordinate voters registration.
Yeah, yeah, you could do both at the same time, absolutely. Yep.
When you say bring to a booth to public places, you could set up at a festival or a park or a park avenue fest or any of those like big public venues, Cornhill,
Yep.
and represent there. And
You
walk
could.
people through the process there. I think it's great rather than bringing it to closed groups to really just make it very inclusive.
Right.
Especially if we have candy.
It's amazing what candy will like. People will talk to you with candy. I mean, it's absolutely true.
The Puerto Rican festival. That's the
Puerto Rican
festival you want.
festival, yeah, yeah.
It's the best food.
Yeah. There's also, you could do door-to-door registration. That's hard work. We don't do it. We're a bunch of little white ladies who are scared of the inner city, so we don't do it. But that would be what it would take, really. Yes.
How about registration, like at some of the bars? I mean, I'm thinking of the Swoburger. There's probably 400 people there tonight, all between the age of 20 and 20.
Registration.
Really good idea.
I mean, it's packed every night.
Yeah.
If the bar was okay with it, because
Yeah.
it's private, right?
Yeah, we would
Yeah,
talk
if
to
they
them.
were okay with it. Yeah, right, Funk and Waffles was okay. Sure, yeah.
And there's like groups like Teen Empowerment. One of my best days of voter registration was the day when they were like dedicating a mural that had just been done, and so they had all these teens with their slam poetry, and they just got this huge group of people on the street corner, and I just went around with a clipboard and signed up probably 20 or 30 voters in an hour, which normally I'm lucky if I get 5 in an hour. So if you're really looking for places with low turnout voters, you can find them, but it does take work.
Are there rules about providing incentives for voter registration?
There are rules. You're not allowed to give
Other than a
incentives.
sticker?
No. Well, yeah, you can give a sticker.
How about a button?
Like, I once had a scheme where, maybe we could give prizes to people for registering other people, and it turns out that was kind of...
So anything with cash value you cannot exchange
Yeah.
just for a registration.
Yeah, because you're just doing it to talk to you, which really is all it will guarantee.
Yeah, they'll get the candy if it's low.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
But the registration is, that's
Yeah.
But it couldn't be like a coupon for local businesses, say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't do that. And you can't do that with a I voted sticker either. Alice White, who's always running on the Green Party, he owns a store. He wanted to, give a coupon to people where I voted. He was told that was not.
Barbara, thank you so much.